Hey, Greg, thanks again for your time as always.
Hey, Kevin.
I've already been challenged on text message here about whether I have a good question, so I hope it's a good question. I remember your first camp in 2018, and it was at Chula Vista. I guess 2019, but it was in Chula Vista in any case, where you had a training facility, you had a cafeteria, you had a weight room, everyone stayed on campus. And then since then, you've gone around to different places in the country now in Arizona. I'm wondering, do you think it's an advantage for countries like Mexico, for example, that have a training facility in one place to keep going back there? Or do you like this model better where you actually move around the country? Thank you.
Wow, that is a great question, Kevin. You opened up a whole can of worms. I'll tell you that.
Thank you.
I believe, and this is just my opinion, that it's beneficial for us to have a national training center, and not only for consistency of, the senior team, but also to have all the other teams, the ability for them to be there as well. I've been around the world and was lucky enough to see some of the national training facilities of other countries, like St. George's, in England, and it's a laboratory, man. You see all the coaches interacting, you see the teams there, and really the players feel at home. So but that's a big project, man. That doesn't come easy. And when you think about COVID times and some revenue loss, it's not an easy thing to get done. But I would much prefer that.
Kevin, we can also mention that Gregg's first game as head coach was here in the Phoenix area, January 27th, 2019, a 3-0 win against Panama. Next, we'll go to Paul Tenorio from The Athletic.
Hey, Greg. Happy New Year. Hope you're doing well.
Hey, Paul.
I know you've played Jamaica twice in these qualifiers, but now you're looping back around to the first teams that you played in qualification. And I wonder what kind of perspective or how different it is facing a team for a second time in qualification, and just kind of how different it is for you guys now having gone through a huge chunk of games, maybe how differently you think about the rhythms of these triple game windows than you did the first time you faced these three teams.
I think we're more familiar with the triple game window. I think what we've learned is expect the unexpected. You never know who's going to be available to play in each game. You have to be willing to adapt. You have to take one game at a time. Although we might be more familiar with the opponent, there's still the aspect that now you're playing them either home or away, and that makes a huge difference, as we all know, in CONCACAF. So, all I would say is that we're looking forward to this January window. We're looking forward to the first game against El Salvador. And we're ready for it, and we're using this camp to get one group ready, and the European guys are doing their thing, and we'll be prepared and we'll be ready to go.
Next will be Ron Blum from the Associated Press.
Hey, Greg, thanks for doing this. What do you anticipate is the availability of Gio and Tim Weah? And from your experience in October with the home, road, home, what did you learn from that? And do you expect the rotation to go any differently in these three than those three?
With Gio and Tim, it's too early to tell. We just don't know yet. We have 14 days till we come into camp, and those 14 days will be important. Regarding the question about home, away home, some of it we're not going to be able to control, right? We have a couple guys that are on cards. You never know with injuries. You never know with whatever. So we're going to adapt, and whatever we need to do to compete in all three games and potentially win all three games, we're going to do, and we'll make the best possible decisions to put the team in good positions to win.
Next will be Julia Lopez.
Hey, Coach. So you are more than halfway through qualifiers. What do you want to see from your team over the next 6 games?
I think I know if we continue with this points per game, we'll qualify for the World Cup. We know that. So for us, it's about closing this out. And we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I think one important lesson we learned from September camp in the September qualifying window is taking one game at a time. And things change very quickly. As you mentioned, we're just over halfway there. And after this window, I think we'll be 78% there. So we're getting closer. But for us, it's about steady, take one game at a time, and prepare to win that next game.
Next will be Doug McIntyre from Fox.
Thanks, Michael. Hi, Greg. Thanks for doing this. Two questions, if I can, quickly. Just generally, how much do you expect to lean more on the European-based players at the end of this month, just because MLS is out of season? And more specifically on that note, your center backs. I mean, how much do you expect Miles Robinson, Walker Zimmerman to be able to contribute this month? And if there's any question there, does that potentially open the door for someone like John Brooks, Tim Ream, Matt Miazga, who weren't in November, to come back in for this one? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think the important thing here, Doug, is just to understand why we did the December camp and why we had these guys playing. Some of the European guys, Brendan Aronson, for example, hasn't played in a month, right? He was off December 12th. A guy like Walker Zimmerman, his last game was December 18th, and now he was back in camp on January 7th. So there wasn't that much time off for these guys. But what we're going to do is use these next 2 weeks to evaluate where this group is at. We're going to play 3 scrimmages, and we'll get them up to close to 90 minutes in the last scrimmage, and then we'll be able to tell. And the most important thing is that we can put a team on the field that can compete at a high level, because we know that's what World Cup qualifying games are about. And then we'll make the best possible decision we can to get the group that we think can do that on the field.
Next will be Jeff Carlisle from ESPN FC.
Thanks, Michael. Hey, Greg.
Hey, Jeff.
You've had a couple of occasions now to see Aaron Long up close. I think he was in the Cincinnati. He was in camp before the game in Cincinnati. He was there in December. What kind of progress have you seen from him over these months? And, how far away is he, do you think, from maybe not contributing in these games, but, perhaps later on down the line with some of the final qualifiers?
I think it's reasonable to expect. He looks great. His progression from Cincinnati to December to now has been right in line. The line's going like this. He's doing a good job. For us, it's about, as I mentioned, having fit players, having guys in rhythm available. And I'm not sure he's going to get there, but hopefully he'll be close. And then, then we know he goes back to preseason with his team, and he can play games there in the start of the season. And hopefully in March we're having different conversations.
We'll go to Jose Romero.
Hey, Coach. Regarding Brooks Lennon, just what you liked about him last month, and then going into this month, and kind of him getting his chance here to get on this team and make a World Cup run.
Yeah, there's no World Cup run yet, right? We still have to qualify, we know that. But Brooks has done a good job. It was nice seeing him in camp, nice working with him. We thought he played reasonably well against Bosnia, and now it's a chance for him to validate that in the next camp. We're going to play 3 scrimmages, as I mentioned. It will be nice to see how he progresses and see if he can make this qualifying roster. And one thing I'll say is that, we have, 19 guys in camp or 20 guys in camp, and, I don't think that, if they don't make the roster for January qualifying window, it's not a final determination. We know where these guys are at. We know what we need for this window, and, there will be opportunity enough as the year goes on.
We'll go to Paul Kennedy from Soccer America.
Thank you, and thanks, Greg. How much has COVID affected the organization of this camp, say, compared to even the start of December camp? And will you think of having a larger roster in January, just given the fact of that uncertainty about you just don't know how COVID will affect teams, because teams around the world are getting hit very hard right now with positives, throughout the last couple of weeks? Yeah,
good question. COVID has hit us in this camp. There have been some cases of guys entering camp with COVID. Fortunately, Most are asymptomatic, and now it's just about a little bit of a waiting game. But that's our reality, and that's what all sports teams are dealing with. So we'll be ready to adapt. We will have a contingency plan in place. We're not exactly sure how many players extra will take, but we're going to be thorough and make sure we have a roster that can compete, because from all indications this thing spreads quickly, although people aren't necessarily, or at least what we've seen, there hasn't been a ton of sickness, but it has been spreading.
Next will be Sam Stejskal.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, Greg. Hope you're doing well. I wanted to ask you about Jesus Ferreira. He's agreed to a new contract with Dallas. He's been in a few straight camps with you, November, December, and now again in January. What have you seen from him over the last year, both with FCD and when you've had him in with the national team?
I always thought highly of Jesus. I think he's an exceptional player. We like what he can do in the forward position. In last camp, we had to play him there based on availability of other players on the wing. But I see him as a forward, as a 9, and I think he can do a great job there. It's just what you're looking for in that position. But he can score goals. He can drop into midfield. He can press really well. So to me, he's an excellent forward to lead the line. It's been nice to see his development. He's a young player, and it's nice to see the type of year he had last year, adapting to different positions and still getting goals and assists. And I think he's got a high ceiling.
Next will be Ivan Skolarsek from SBI Soccer.
Michael, Happy New Year, Greg, and thanks for taking the time. Wanted to ask you about 2 fullbacks, one in camp, one not in camp. First, Duane Jones, obviously coming off a great year for New England. He's a right-footed left back, and I know you like having your left backs be left-footed, but what did you like that you saw from him in New England and his development? And the other fullback is Serginho Dest, who's obviously going through a tough time at Barcelona. You may not be there long. How do you kind of deal with a player like him going through a situation like that? And does he strike you as the type of guy who can compartmentalize that once qualifiers come around?
I speak to Serginho all the time, and he's in a situation where he's probably at one of the biggest clubs of the world, and there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure every single week, and I think he does a good job of dealing with it, not letting it affect him too much. He's a competitor, and he's a guy that I can see, waiting for an opportunity, and then when he gets his opportunity, performing well. He's resilient, and he has the right mindset to do it. He's been working hard. He had a little injury setback at the end of the year with his back, but he's committed to making it work, and he has a great attitude towards that. Regarding Duane, he's been a good surprise so far in camp. We've only trained twice, but he showed the same type of tenacity that we see with New England. Very athletic fullback, aggressive, good competitor. Gets up and down, and he's an interesting profile for sure.
Next is Brian Sciaretta from American Soccer Now.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Greg, for doing this. 2 players I just wanted to ask you about, one in camp, one not. Daryl DK just made a move over this month to West Brom, and I know he's been in and out of your getting called up for you. But what do you see about that move and how it helps him? And then also Gabriel Slonina, you said ahead of the Nations League you thought that the goalkeeping position needed to get younger on the national team, and you were talking about David Ochoa. He obviously left, but what have you seen from Gabriel Slonina, a 17-year-old who obviously starts in MLS, at a very young age? How is he adjusting to camp at that age with you?
He's been great. He's got a fantastic mentality. Another player with just always wanting to get better, always wanting to improve, always, very professional for being 17 years old. You actually wouldn't know he's 17, but when you interact with him. So I think he's got a bright future, and he's been doing well on the field also. The only hiccup we see is when I shoot on him after training, is when his performance goes down a little bit. But other than that, he's been solid. In terms of the other guy you asked me about was who? DK, Daryl. So I think, Daryl was obviously coached by Ishmael in his last club at Nottingham Forest. And, Nottingham Forest, right? No. Where? Barnsley, excuse me, at Barnsley. My gosh. At Barnsley. So he's familiar with him, familiar with the style of play. And I think any player, as soon as you have the trust of a coach and you know how the coach works and you're used to working with him, you perform well, and I think it's helpful. So, in Orlando, he had that with Oscar, and now he's moving to a place where he's going to have that as well. And I think that's important for Darryl, and I think he's going to come out of this, playing well and scoring goals, and we're excited to see his development.
We'll take two more for Greg and start with Felipe Cardenas from The Athletic.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, Greg.
Hey, Felipe.
Hey, how are you doing? Miles Robinson, there's just a lot of interest in his continued development and whether or not now is the best time for him to pursue European football or perhaps stay in MLS and continue to play here and solidify a spot at the World Cup if and when the U.S. qualifies. What is your opinion on his specific situation, and have you had conversations with him, perhaps counseling him on when players go through that? What would you say?
Yeah, there's a lot of conversations, I think, in the media. There's a lot of conversations that I have privately with the player. But to me, it's always about what the player wants and what the player's goals and aspirations are. That's the starting point. It's never going to be what I want. There's never an agenda I push with the players. It's just hearing what they want and then supporting them with that. If a player thinks it's best to be here in Major League Soccer and play, that's great. If he thinks it's best to try to go to Europe, that's great. It's just really supporting them and helping them achieve what they want to in their career. And in Miles's case, we've had some conversations, but a lot of it, a lot of that question can be answered by speaking directly to Miles.
Last question goes to John Lupo.
Hey, Greg, first of all, Happy New Year.
Thank you, John.
No problem.
Happy New Year.
So Brooks was in here talking before about how competitive this camp is, how many good players you have. Is there one thing you're looking for overall, any qualities that you're looking for when you decide who to pick? And also, does the fact that you're playing El Salvador and Canada, Honduras, you've already played them, how they play, the tactics they may use, does that factor into your decision as well?
Well, I think something that we're looking for in all the players is optimizing their fitness levels, making sure that they can do the work necessary to compete in World Cup qualifiers. And then the second thing is their competitiveness. When the whistle blows on the 27th, it's on and it's for real. And these games are very competitive, and we need guys that are showing that they're ready to compete here in this camp, and the guys that we're watching in Europe, because we know it's going to be a difficult window, and we want to have a good window.